Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here and to speak to you this evening on the subject of leadership, which is something that we all need to know about. We all need to improve our skills as leaders. It's so important for so many reasons. I usually begin by asking people, are leaders born or made? What do you think? How many think leaders are born as leaders? And that's it. Okay? How many think people are made leaders? Well, far many more people thought that leaders are made. I do want to warn you, however, that it is important that they get born first. But if they get born first, then most of what people know about leadership, they learned. They learned it from something. They probably didn't learn it in a formal course in school because schools don't offer courses on leadership. I think they should. But they probably learned it indirectly by what they read, what they focused on, what they were taught by their parents, what they learned in their first couple of jobs, what their bosses taught them, the people they emulated and the people that they admired. They probably borrowed those characteristics from those people and in that way learned the good lessons of leadership, hopefully forgot the bad ones, and then incorporated it into how they acted as leaders when they got the opportunity to lead in business or in government or in the military or in social organizations. So leadership is important for rising in business because people who have leadership qualities are always the people that are focused on for promotions. And leadership is important also for kind of organizing your life because the same principles that you use as a leader, you use to organize your life when difficult things happen to you. But leadership nowadays is important for another reason, and it relates to something wonderful that's happening that has a bad side to it. The thing that is wonderful that is happening is our information revolution. We are not just going through an information revolution, we are being overwhelmed with information. We are being flooded with information. The human brain and the human emotions can only process a certain amount of information at a time. And we're getting to overload. We're in the overload mode for those people who are familiar with using the things that I'm talking about. And it has a tendency to make things feel like they're emergencies. It has a tendency to make things feel like it's a crisis. And what does that do? What that does sometimes is have a tendency to make you make wrong decisions about things. Or it makes the people that work for you make wrong decisions about things. If they don't know how to handle this, if they don't know how to process it, if they don't have a philosophy for handling it. And the principles of leadership give you a philosophy for handling it, not running away from it, not being afraid of it, but embracing it, learning it, and then figuring out the impact and the damage that it can do. The information technology makes it possible for us now to take many more polls. Politicians are polling all the time. They're taking polls about everything. Businesses are polling all the time. And using market research, groups of people to get opinions. And so what's the whole purpose of all this? The whole purpose of all this is to convince you to vote for the politician or buy the product. So how do you protect yourself against that? And what do you do? How do you train yourself to be a leader in this information age that is pushing everybody into being followers? I'll tell you what you do. You do five things. You read. Make sure you read. You listen. You debate. You write. And you think. You do those 5 things. Those are the 5 things we are being given less time to do. by the information flooding in on us. You read because you want to have a basis for making your own decisions. Because what we want from you as a leader is the same thing we want from you as a person. You are a unique human being. There is something unique about every single one of you. And you are going to have a happy and successful life if you discover that. Reading makes it possible for you to come up with your own ideas. Listening is an important part of developing your uniqueness. As I said at the very beginning, many leaders who are educated to be leaders are not educated in school, they're educated at work. I learned most of what I know about leadership, and I write about this in my book, from the people I worked for, much more than from the professors that I had in college or law school. I copied a lot of what I know about being an executive from Ronald Reagan, who was my boss when I was Associate Attorney General. Many of the things I did as mayor of New York, I copied from Ronald Reagan. I set up a few goals, not too many. Reduce crime, reduce government expenditures, reduce taxes. I had 3 goals as mayor. I accomplished other things, I failed at other things, but most of my concentration were on those 3 things. Instead of trying to do 1,000 things, my mother used to always say, if you try to do too many things at once, you do nothing well. And when you have a complex job like being mayor of a city of 8 million people with a budget of $50 billion, if you try to do too many things, you really do nothing well. So I learned the lesson from Ronald Reagan of focus on what's most important, get that done, and if you have time, get all the rest of it done. But make sure you get your priorities done. That's a lesson of leadership that no professor taught me. That's a lesson I learned by working for someone who operated that way. And that's why listening is such an important part of growing. The third thing is debate. It's almost the same thing, but what it means is, actually, if you can, go talk to people that hold opposing points of view. And particularly ones that oppose your political ideas or your preferences about business. I generally believe that the best way to organize the economy of a city, a state, or a country is to reduce the amount of money that government spends. Because I think governments all over the world spend too much money. And the best thing to do is to reduce taxes and put it in the hands of people and let them grow the money, because they grow money better than government. Government loses money, people grow money. Now that's my political viewpoint. But when I made decisions about the budget of New York, I listened to people who had an opposite political viewpoint, who believed that we had to tax more, who believed that we had to increase expenditures in certain areas. And sometimes I did, when they convinced me of the opposite of that. Always try to expose yourself to the opposing point of view. And if you find yourself afraid to listen to the opposing point of view, it is giving you a very strong signal that you're failing as a leader. It means you're becoming so defensive that you're not really sure of your position. Because the things that I'm sure of, I'm more than willing to listen to the other side. So debate is an enormously important part of developing your ideas, of being able to figure out what you need to know in order to develop your own unique point of view. It is also important that you write. Now, what do I mean by write? I mean any way you want, any way that's comfortable for you. For some people, you can write big, long explanations. For other people, you can make outlines. When I have to make a big decision, sometimes I'll create a column. Pro, con. Here are the reasons I should decide yes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here are the reasons I should decide no, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. so I can actually see them on paper, so that I can synthesize them better, so that I can understand them better. I believe anytime you have to make a difficult decision, you should do that. And finally, think. I know that sounds strange, but think. Lots of people don't think before they make a decision. Take time to think. Now, if it's an emergency, if it's a crisis, you don't have time to think. And when I train people in crisis management and emergency management, I tell them just the opposite. I tell them, you're probably not going to have time to think, so you have to operate on your intuition. So you better think in advance. Because if you don't think in advance, you won't know what to do. And that's why for emergency response and emergency management and crisis management, we go through so many what would be called exercises or play acting in emergency. But remember what I told you at the beginning? Part of what the information age does to you is make you think everything is an emergency. It gives you a sense of urgency. Most of the decisions you and I make in our life simply are not emergencies. Most of the time we think they're emergencies, they're not. When the person trying to sell us that automobile over there tells us that we better buy it now because it won't be available at that price tomorrow, that really is not an emergency, because it probably isn't true. I have a rule about pressure sales. I always say no. If you pressure me to buy something, it probably isn't all that good anyway, and it's better for me just to say no and see if I still want it the next day or the day after. I do not allow people to pressure me into a decision unless it really is an emergency, and then I can make decisions like that. Thank you very much.
I think it's particularly interesting because in my study of hundreds of leaders who have failed, none of them have failed to lead other people. They failed to lead themselves. If you look at how did these leaders fail, they really went off track themselves and weren't able to deal with their own reality. So let's talk about these 5 things. Self-awareness. How do you get self-awareness? You know, you can't just say, oh, I'm going to be self-aware. You have to get it through experience on the playing field. You have to get in and have that experience where you're really on the line. And the second thing then is you get feedback from people. ML describes when he was failing, he'd missed his budget by 30 million one quarter. It was 120 million. He's getting calls from Jack Welch. Jack Welch wants to take over his relationship with General Electric because ML's running the plastic business, his relationship with General Motors, and they couldn't afford to lose General Motors and the plastics business. And he's getting all this feedback. And then finally he said, you know, at a certain point in time, the third step is you need to be reflective and introspective. How am I going to get through this, and who am I in this crisis? How am I going to come through it? Am I going to hold true to my values? Because ML knew he could correct the problem by breaking a lot of contracts, but it would destroy a lot of relationships. So that's when he made this statement, that leadership's a long journey into your own soul. And I think he really meant just finding out who you are, figuring out who you are as a person. The second thing, we talk about values. Again, I think it's meaningless to stand up here and for you to stand in front of people and say, these are the values we represent as a company. It's even, you know, not so meaningful to practice good values when things are going well. That's pretty easy. When things are going well, just stay on course. What do you do when you think the whole place may come tumbling down? We may fail. There's a great story from Narayana Murthy, the founder of Infosys, who told us a story. He founded this computer services company. It was a very computer software company in India. He'd come back from France, and he founded this company in his early 30s. And Murthy said, you know, I want to build a company that's the most, we won't be the largest in India, but we want to be the most respected company in India. And he said, you know, we're not going to pay bribes. Everyone in India pays bribes. We're not going to do that. Well, the first thing that happened is he had no money. He founded the company on $50 he borrowed from his wife. And he couldn't buy a computer, but he needed a telephone system. And so the guys coming in to install the telephone system said, we need a little money, a little payment here. You know, wasn't a lot of money, $20 to get your phone system installed. Murthy said no. It's interesting. He waited 9 months to get his phone system. Now, as a business person, he said, that was a crazy decision. Just pay the $20. But he said, we're trying to set a standard for the company to carry on. Today, Infosys has 110,000 employees, and everyone tells that story, that same story, because it kind of set the standard for who they were as an organization. So I think values are something you work on practicing every day, but particularly when you're really under the pressure. The third area has to do with motivations. What really motivates you? No, I think all of us, everyone in this room, likes to have the respect of our peers. We like salary increases. We like to know we're doing well. We like bonuses. We like title increases. I like being a full professor at Harvard Business School, not a senior lecturer at some school you've never heard of. Yeah, those are all extrinsic motivations. Those are all the external things. And the question is, how much do we look outside of our organizations to gain, outside of ourselves to gain motivation? Does that really turn us on? Are we chasing great newspaper stories? Well, there's nothing wrong with those things, but I think they need to be balanced by your intrinsic motivation. What really matters to you in life? At the end of the day, what are you going to say was important? That you followed your values, that you built a great organization, you created products and services, you helped a customer, you helped people, you made their lives better, you helped mentor someone helped you, you led a good family life and you raised a family. Those are all your intrinsic motivation. I'm not saying get rid of the extrinsic, I'm saying just keep a balance between the intrinsic, the internal, and the extrinsic, the external. But then, if you can put your greatest, if you know your motivations, you know what really turns you on, and you put that together with your greatest capabilities. In the old days, we talk about people's weaknesses. I think today the key is thinking about what are our strengths, and do I have a job where I use my greatest capabilities? Because I'll guarantee you, if you can put together your motivations and your strengths into a single job, it's what we call your motivated capabilities. That's your sweet spot. That's a sweet spot and you can operate. Are you in that sweet spot now? You know, it's like if you're a great soccer player in the goal, you're not going to make a great striker, do you? But are you really motivated to play that position and do it extremely well? Are you motivated to do your job well, and does it play to your strengths? Because if it does, you'll do really well. Not only that, if you can get the people in your organization each in the right position, so they're highly motivated by your work, by their work, by your work, and they're really good at what they do, you'll have a highly successful organization. Well, the fourth area has to do with building a support team around you. You know why? Because leadership is very lonely. It can be very lonely. When you feel like the buck stops with me, I'm the court of last resort, I got to make this decision. Everyone's arguing back and forth, I got to make the decision. It can be very lonely. Who do you turn to? Who do you turn to? I like to think, I'll tell you who I turn to. I turn to my wife, Penny. We've been married now, we're having our 40th anniversary this fall. And Penny's always there for me. She's a great counselor. She's there to support me when I'm down. I tell her enough about the business so she feels like she's engaged in it. And if I get too high on myself or start going off track or worry more about the externals, she kind of pulls me back to ground center. I think it's also really important to form a support team where you have mentors. That you have a mentor, a coach, someone who's not your direct supervisor, someone probably outside the organization, could be inside, but maybe outside, that can give you good coaching and good advice and counsel. The third thing I have that's a great benefit to me, I have a men's group I've been meeting with now for over 30 years, every Wednesday morning, but we meet and talk about life. We talk about the really important things of our life. There's 8 of us, typically 6 on a morning, and we'll talk about really important things in life, and if we have a difficulty, we can share it. So who can you really talk to? And I think it really helps to have, if you will, a support group, a group of people that you can share who you are, that probably you don't work with, that you're not competing with, people outside that you can really turn to, because we all need that level of support. Well, the fifth thing, it's interesting, this is the young generation, this is all they want to talk about these days, is can I have a successful home life and a successful work life? Can I do both? The question is, how can you lead an integrated life with all these pressures? And so I think what we really look for is that sense of integrity in your life. You can be the same person. Can you honestly say that you're the same person at work, at home, in your community, and in your personal life? I can tell you earlier in life I was anything but that same person, because I was trying to get ahead at work, I was trying to be Mr. Laid Back at home. But you know, I think if you can do that, then you can say you're living your life with integrity and you have an integrated life. Because I think if people talk about working 100 hours a week, you can't sustain that. So I think you'll actually be a better leader if you have that kind of sense in your life that you're fulfilling all aspects of your life. People that just work probably won't make good judgments and make good decisions, particularly in leadership roles, because it's not just about time work, it's how you do all these things. Well, all of those things, if we can build the self-awareness, if we can practice our values, if we can work in our sweet spot of our motivations and our capabilities, our motivated capabilities, if we can build a support team around us and we can build an integrated life, then we're ready to become great leaders of people. So I think in the end of the day, what leadership, to get performance today, it really means that you can empower people to step up and lead throughout your organization. And I will guarantee you that an organization of highly empowered people will outcompete an organization that's hierarchical from top to bottom every time. Well, I hope you'll use your leadership to be a very fulfilling thing. I found it the most fulfilling thing in my life to take on really tough challenges, get knocked down, work with a group of people, use their capabilities to figure out tough problems, come together around that, and you know, when you can win the game, there's no better feeling. There's no better satisfaction seeing people now and say, you know, we really made a difference through our work. That to me is the most fulfilling thing, and I hope you'll find that fulfillment of leadership, whether it's in a crisis or whether it's in the good times, that through your own leadership, you can really make a difference in the world. Thank you very much.